You know what's funny? I mean, I've been doing one of my first formal debates was on atheism with Dan Barker. My first book was on atheism. This was actually the apologetic that got me into Catholic Answers, because they didn't have a lot on atheism, and I felt Catholics were not getting their game together. It's like, we can't just be relying on William Lane Craig to do all this stuff, people. We should be out there. We should be engaging people.
Yeah,
and I'm happy to do that. And I want to see more Catholics engaging atheism and doing that. But so the deal breaker would be, why couldn't I be an atheist?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of issues there. There's different arguments that I defend. But there's one particular argument now I'm thinking of exploring and doing a lot more research on. It came about in my dialogues with Alex O'Connor recently, the past few weeks, at the Capturing Christianity Exchange down in Houston. So we did that a few weeks ago. Alex, as the Cosmic Skeptic, has his channel. We debated before, and we had a few dialogues while I was down there. We were talking about morality, and I was really challenging him just on human dignity. Like, why is it we can fumigate rats, but we don't treat human infants like pigs, even though pigs are smarter than infants? And other questions related to this. There's a lot of different things people see as to why. And I find the argument from contingency and motion and the kalam, those are powerful arguments. But one particular feature of the moral argument has stood out for me for a long time, and I'm thinking about writing just a whole book on that. It might be my first academic book. Yeah. Oxford University Press, Baker Academic, footnotes, big and thick. I'd love to be able to do that. So that might be the one. Maybe you'll do a PhD out of it. I don't know. But it's the question of intrinsic human value and human dignity. And this has come a lot when I would dialogue on abortion. I am even more confident of the wrongness of abortion than on some aspects of natural theology. Especially when you deal with contingency arguments and things like that for the necessary being, very abstract. I am just absolutely convinced that abortion is wrong, infanticide is wrong, because when I look at all of the data, the only way that I can explain that it is not immoral to fumigate a house full of rats, but it is immoral to fumigate a house full of squatters, even though squatters can be highly annoying.
Yeah.
I would not pump sarin gas in to get rid of them.
Right.
But I would do that to rats.
Right.
Or snakes, or other sentient creatures. Why I treat squatters, newborn infants, better than even non-human animals that are cognitively superior. This is the group that are persons that have a right to life. And to me, it is, and some people have said to me in my pro-life debates, that's just because that's a religious view, saying that human species matters more than others. So your view is ultimately religious. And I thought for a long time that was a weakness of the position. I'm incorporating, metaphysics and theology. I want a strict secular pro-life argument. And now I don't really care. I would say, no, actually, my view, yes, it also entails that members of the human species have value precisely because the ultimate source of value values them. And it is intrinsic because God, who just is goodness itself, bestows this value on us. And it doesn't mean that it's extrinsic in some way, much the same way that H2O has certain properties like wetness that deal with a relational aspect between hydrogen and oxygen, is an analogy that I might make. Our intrinsic dignity does come from a relational value between us and God. So I think that's the biggest one for me. I mean, I have the cosmological arguments, all that stuff, but it hits very close to home that I am just so convinced of human dignity. And I don't believe it does explain it. It's just going to be a brute fact that I find highly unsatisfying. That is what gets me. And then also, it's just the best answer. Christian theism is the best answer to the problem of evil in a practical sense. Okay. In that, look, things just absolutely suck sometimes. You're absolutely right. I am only going to accept a view that everything sucks and it will never be redeemed. I am only going to accept that depressing view if there are overwhelming reasons that it's true.
Okay. Yeah. But
there aren't.
Right.
Instead, there are good reasons to believe evil will be redeemed. So why wouldn't I believe in this beautiful truth if there are, at the least, there are good reasons for it? And so, yeah, so I think that's been a big one for me. And I'm looking forward maybe in a year. I want to write just a general defense of Christian theism, but I think I'm going to explore the argument from human dignity in a much more detailed way, because there's lots of people who do different arguments.
Sure.
And they get it down to a finely tuned instrument. I think that's great. Just like what William Lane Craig did with the Kalam argument 50 years ago.
Right.
In the 70s, he kind of resurrected it. This is something that because especially from my background doing pro-life work for so long before Catholic apologetics, it really speaks close to me. Like, wow, I've been reading a lot about this, and this has been something I've been concerned about for a long time. They kind of go together well. So I think soon I might take a break from the popular level books, and that'll just be the big behemoth. But it'd be fun. So we'll see.
Yeah, I look forward to that. Now, I wanted to ask about benevacantism. And for those who might not be familiar with the term, the idea is that Pope Benedict XVI is still the Pope. He's not an emeritus. He's actually still the Pope, and Pope Francis is not the Pope. What do you think about this movement, and do you think that this is a dangerous movement?
I think that it's not spiritually healthy. In the same way that people who spend all of their time reading about Catholic gossip, or spend all of their time reading about where different clerics or Catholic personalities fall short, that's not spiritually healthy for you. Yeah. It's a kind of spiritual pornography. Yeah. It is, if you think about it. Like, why do people look at pornography? Well, because it makes them feel good. It makes them feel like, you have this high physically and emotionally from consuming this material. And I would say some of this material can rise to the level of spiritual pornography because you look at it and it gives you a sense of superiority. Yeah. It gives you a sense of pride. Like, I know about all this stuff, and let me tell you about the real thing that's happened and what's really bad about it. And so you can become consumed by anger, and anger is an addictive feeling. It's like salt. It makes things more, your natural passions for or against something, it can make it enlarge it, so to speak, and you get addicted to it and you want more of it. Like, you can't stop at one potato chip. And so you get angry and you want to get more angry about stuff. And so dangerous, I don't know if I want to use that term per se, but I think having the view, well, I mean, it can be dangerous, because if you don't believe Pope Francis is really the Pope, then you would disobey any of his magisterial acts. They'd have no authority, and that would place you in disobedience to the Vicar of Christ. Yeah. Now, I think for most regular people, I wouldn't say it's dangerous, because they're not necessarily directly under these magisterial acts. So it's just more like they believe something really kooky, and it's spiritually unhealthy. But spiritually unhealthy things can become dangerous if you let them metastasize. So that is where, and the thing is, I understand, it's hard for me that some people criticize benevacantism and try to water down all the concerns. I understand people having concerns, being confused about things that Pope Francis has said. He shoots from the hip in a way that John Paul II and Benedict did not. Right. In ways that disappoint conservatives and liberals. Yeah. So that has to be taken into account. But yeah, the view itself, I think, is spiritually unhealthy. And part of that, of course, it's always grounded in the view that it's not true, it's not correct. Because if it were correct, it's like, because some people who make these arguments will say, well, Trent, this isn't a crazy view. There have been 30 anti-popes in church history. Sure, and I get that it could be possible that someone who claims to be the Pope is not. Yeah. But where I find the analogy breaks down is like when you go back in church history and you have anti-popes, there is always somebody else who says that person is not the Pope, I'm the Pope. So there's not a case where you have in church history that you have someone, who is nearly every single person recognizes is the Pope. There is someone else who is an anti-Pope who doesn't declare for themselves that they're an anti-Pope. Right. I don't think there is any. I mean, I haven't researched it, but I'm willing to bet money on this. There is not. I mean, there could have been someone that people rallied behind and he was reluctant. I don't know. But I'm almost positive every anti-pope in history has publicly declared they are the true pope. So the analogy wildly breaks down. in trying to say, because Benedict has not, I think the defenders of benevacantism, I would ask them, if let's say I was in a debate and there's cross-examination, and this isn't stuff that I debate. My plate is very full of things to debate. But if I was in cross-examination or debate, I would ask, has Pope Benedict explicitly said that he is still the Pope? Has he explicitly said this? No. All they're saying is that he resigned in an unusual way that would implicitly. But then I could say, since his resignation, he definitely hasn't explicitly. You can't even argue he's implicitly. He calls himself Pope Emeritus. He still wears white. I'm like, that doesn't even rise to the level of implicit. So, I mean, and I'm getting more animated. It's just because it's fun to be in person with you.
Yeah. By the way, I have a comment at this angle, but 2D, two-dimensional. It's interesting seeing you from this perspective. The mic is at an angle just like it normally is, but now I'm seeing 3D.
So totally. Extra dimension. And whenever I see you, it's just like with when I was with Alex O'Connor and Joe Schmid in Houston a few weeks ago. Everybody that I know from YouTube, when I meet them in person, they're taller in real life. like Michael's taller than I am. Alex O'Connor is like 6'1". Schmid is like at least my height, if not taller. I always thought, like, when I see them on my phone, I always think they're like 4 feet tall. And then I meet them in person. I'm like, my gosh, you're taller than I am. All right, I guess I think I'm shrinking. I used to be almost 6 feet tall. Now I'm just like a solid 5'10". But yeah, so I mean, I don't want to belittle people. I know some people watching might hold the benevacantist position, or they might be really sympathetic to it. And I just want to say, look, I understand concerns that you have with things that Pope Francis has said and done. Yeah. But at the same time, our faith calls us to be obedient. Even if you're only obedient when you agree, you're not really practicing the virtue of obedience, or you're practicing the virtue of obedience in like kind of a default way. You're not really trying. It's like when Jesus says, love your enemies, like be loving to people. Well, sure, it's easy to love people when it's like what Jesus says in the Gospels, right? It's easy to love people who love you.
Yeah.
The real challenge is, can you love people who hate you?
Yeah.
It's easy to obey people who give you orders you want to obey. The question is, can you obey people who give you orders you don't want to obey? And so, I think that was actually one of the things you wanted to ask me about. I mean, we could even shelve for now.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
So there.